Hi, my name's Demara, and today I'm going to be talking to you about food and all the different levels of food and how it's changed over the years. And certainly how people's opinion of what is food has changed over my own lifetime. It began for me in a really maybe unusual way, because I came from a family that ate out of the garden. Actually, we had a large garden, and my father grew the basic vegetables, like the potatoes, the onions, the carrots. These are real staples in England, and you would then build your meal around those sorts of vegetables. And then in the winter, your Brussels sprouts and your cauliflowers, your broccoli, and all sorts of things like that. And my mother actually grew strawberries and raspberries and sometimes blackcurrants. We ate a very good diet. So I was very lucky, because even when in the 60s, everything changed. I remember the day that the first supermarket opened in our small market town, and they gave a free chicken if you went in and spent quite a lot of money in those days, actually. And we weren't a rich family. I actually lived on a council house estate in England, and my father worked hard, but and my mother did casual work, but there was still only just enough money to go round. So my mother wasn't one of those who queued up, but I had a friend whose father was a builder and ran his own building company and had done really well for himself, and his wife was there buying her loads of groceries and getting her free chicken. And when I went round the house, there was this whole chicken, which people didn't do. People didn't have a whole chicken until Christmas. There wasn't, I never heard of people eating turkeys in my childhood, because that was so expensive. But this is the progression that happened, that when the supermarket opened, not only did you get a free chicken on occasions, but what actually happened was there was all this pre-packed food. And this was around I think it was around 1960. I was about 11 or 12 then. And that was when I kind of remember the supermarket opening. It might have been a little bit before that, maybe in 58 when I was 10. I don't remember exactly. But that was when people who had money bought pre-packed food. And certainly in our house, we started to have, there was a little shop next to us on the estate that I grew up on. So it was very convenient to pop there and get a packet of biscuits. So there was sugar. And my family totally into sugar. Something I was brought up with was a cup of tea with 3 teaspoonfuls of sugar. So by the age of about, 12, I had many fillings in my mouth, which were all metal, which later in life I realized how that had affected my nervous system, because I was a very sensitive person anyway. And so the big thing about, later on down the line, I realized that sugar, I'd already given up sugar way before I realized about the metal in the fillings. But my father, who was a very nervous person and sensitive person, I had all his characteristics, including his hair color, eye color, and everything. And my mother was completely opposite, brown eyes, dark hair, and my sister was the same. But my father and I had the same demeanor, if you like, with sensitivity, but he never used it in any way in our home, let's put it that way, because he did out of home, because he became a personnel officer, so he put his more human characteristics into that, but he certainly didn't do it very often at home. But for me, the sugar was one of the really bad things. It really affected my early years as I grew up, but I learned to contend with the fact that I was emotional, sensitive, allergic, all sorts of things. And it wasn't really until I got into my 20s that I started working with food, when I had eczema on my hands and on my face in different places. And I started to go onto a whole food diet when I was around 25. But the really big change for me was when I was, again, I was 25, I was traveling, I'd given up my corporate job in London, and I was pregnant in Canada, and I was up in a amazing place, Banff in Canada. What happened was I started to think, I'm growing this human being. I don't know how many mothers go through this, but to me it was like, I saw my father growing vegetables, and I saw him putting stuff onto the soil, all natural, to grow bigger carrots and a better crop and all sorts of things like that. So it was like, for me, it was like that. I thought, I'm growing a baby. And I was it's like a reception area of this huge hotel, Lake Louise, and I was pregnant. I was working as a receptionist there at the time with a couple of other guys I was traveling with, one the father of the child. And we were there in the winter when there was no residents, which was absolutely amazing, because we had the whole, we could be in that resort, which costs thousands of pounds to stay in, or that hotel, and we were being paid to do it. And I was in the reception area that was still open for staff sometimes, and I'm pretty sure it was there that there was this book spinner with all the books, which you spun the spin around to see the books on the next part. And one of the books fell on the floor, and it was Adele Davis, We Are What We Eat. And I just couldn't believe it. It was like this magical synchronicity, which I was getting used to because I'd been traveling for a while by that time. And probably about 6 to 9 months I'd been traveling anyway, and had let go of all my ideas of what life was about, and I was in a really magical world. And this book dropped on the floor. I picked it up and I read it, and it was like, oh my God, so this is it. I mean, Adele Davis was one of the foundation speakers on food, and she actually talked about pregnancy. So I followed absolutely everything she said. And it was crazy, because she said that if you follow it, you will have not one of these huge, enormous babies. You'll have a 7.5 pound baby, and you will have a really healthy placenta. And all of that happened to me. When I birthed that baby, my firstborn son, he was 7.5 pounds. The nurses were going, oh my God, look at that placenta, because it was so pulsing with the goodness that it should have had. It didn't look like normal ones that they saw. This was crazy. This actually happened. So when I went back to England, I actually, I'm trying to think when I did this, a little bit down the road. I think I had 2 children when I started the little shop with another person who was running this little shop anyway, and I started to put Whole Foods in there because I turned completely vegetarian, health food from that point of being pregnant, and everything was about the physicality of food. And this is what I'm getting to here, because that this whole thing was the start of my awareness journey and my alertness into, I need to have more say in what I do in my life without looking at what other people do. That was a huge move for me. And it began vegetarian at that time. If you think back in the 70s, this is like looking at 1974, 75, it was still pretty rare. But what I'm trying to look at here is that we start with that side of it, don't we? The mechanistic side, which is what our lives were mainly controlled within, is a mechanistic scientific world that analysed the physicality of food and looked at protein, minerals and vitamins. And I'm going to be taking you on a journey that I went on, which came out with nothing like that. So it's like there is that side of it, which is really important if you're going to eat food and you want to make the first move, is make sure you are not eating that crap, sorry, I've got to say that, off the supermarket shelves, because most of the food in supermarkets is not fresh live food. And this is why I put this lovely parsley here. This is huge parsley that we get in Mexico, and this beautiful celery, which I made a pot for so that it wedges in there, and I fill it with water and it keeps going, because the leaves are so nutritious for us. And look that up. I won't have time on this video, because there's a lot of information to go through each food, but the leaves are as important. So if you put it in water, which they sell it like this in the organic shop that I go to, they actually sell it standing in water, but I made myself this so it doesn't fall over. It's very wedged in because of the shape. And the beautiful apples. See, we have a lot of fresh produce here, so it's amazing. But I started this journey with my children. So my 3 children were brought up vegetarian. None of them have stayed with that, although my daughter still loves vegetarian meals that I make, or vegan meals even now. If I'm at home in the UK for any period of time. But they've taken their own paths. But on from there, see, that's the whole physicality of the food starts with the vitamins and the minerals and the protein, doesn't it? And the carbohydrates. And this is how we see nutrition. And most nutritionists, and certainly the ones that come out of the medical field, only deal with that. And yet there is incredible information, incredible information on the Chinese for centuries knew about the yin and yang balance of food. And this was something that I learned pretty early on, probably in my 30s, about the yin and yang of food. And this is the energy balance through the Chinese understanding, which is very deep on our body. Think about acupuncture, which is incredible, and just even the power points on your body, not even using needles. But I've had an incredible release of pain that I had through using the pressure points, and not even, as I say, using needles, and a practitioner. So we know that they have so much knowledge. They went into the energy in a way of yin and yang. Now, I'm not going to go into the complexities of that, because it's huge. The complexities of Chinese medicine, if I'd have been in another life, maybe I'd have gone through that whole discipline. It takes a long time to totally understand the wet, the damp, the heat of food, the yin and the yang, and all the other elements of it. But the one that caught my mind was when I was first told, and I started using this a lot with myself, and still do, but also with clients, thousands of clients that I've talked to over a 40-year period, about yin and yang, because this is really basic and something that you can learn very quickly. I actually tried looking for a good chart that I could put on a short, and do you know what? I couldn't find one now. Years ago, you used to be able to do that, but what's happening is the editing out and the stopping us seeing information is incredible. I find now when I'm on my laptop. I just did a search on something else, which I'm going to explain to you at the end, and I came out with, there was not one piece of good information on what I know is true on that particular subject. But even on the yin and yang, it's changed. I used to be able to download a chart really quickly, so I couldn't this time. So what I'm going to do is just talk to you about the yin and the yang. The yang is when if you think of a medical condition that is yang, it will be depression. It'll be when you feel down and heavy and can't get going, and no energy and heavy energy. Also aggression, anger, all of that heavy, solid stuff, okay? So if you're looking at what not to eat, when you're, well, perhaps I won't go on to that bit yet. Let me just tell you about the yin. Let me get you a picture in your head of at the other end of the spectrum. If you draw a straight line and put yang at the bottom and then put a line through the middle, that's what we're going to go through. And now I'm going right up to the top, and at the top is yin, and that's the other extreme, right, of our balance. And where we really want to be is in the middle, peace, happiness, and our bodies feeling balanced, right? And that's in that middle horizontal. Okay, so up here we have yin, down here we have yang. Not that the apples are yang, just ignore that at the moment. But the yin, the extreme of yin, is alcohol, when we get off our heads and we're not grounded at all. So it's the opposite of being grounded with the yang, okay? So yin is not being grounded, being airy-fairy, being out of your body and not responsible, being disconnected from yourself and your body and the real truth of your life, irresponsible, all of that comes up the top. So we're not surprised, are we, when we see that the extreme of yin foods or substances, because what we put in our mouth is all going into our body and maintaining a certain state. And what state do you want? Do you want that middle line of being in equilibrium? Because that's that line in the middle, which we're going to talk about. But at the top is the extremes, and that is alcohol, drugs. I mean, if you relate to this and want to start looking at what you're doing to yourself with what you put in your mouth, then play this all the way through and then go back to this point, which you can make a note of now, and you'll be able to draw up this chart from what I'm saying and have it on your wall, because that's what I did. So up the top is the alcohol, the drugs, okay? So you've got alcohol, drugs, chemicals. And so your chemicals are not only coming in from your food, they're coming in from your environment because you're breathing them in as well. So that's all that sort of thing. So we've got, let me just have a quick check and see if I've missed anything, because I'm trying to get through a lot of information with you today. Oh, sugar. My God, the one I talked about earlier for me, which was a real downer for my early life, was sugar. So sugar is up there, and all the sweeteners, because they're chemical, they're even worse. And I will do a whole video on the sweetener. God, it's gone out of my mind, the name of that sweetener now. But my mother, actually, her end of her life was completely ruined by a sweetener that she took for 40 years and wouldn't stop. She thought it would keep her slim, so she put it in every cup of tea, and she drank quite a lot of tea. But we'll go into that on another video. But the sugar, alcohol, and chemicals, okay, and drugs. And you can, if you think about this, you can understand it. People take every one of those, because sugar's the same. Sugar's almost as addictive as cocaine, they say. I've never taken cocaine, so I wouldn't know. But it is said to be. And it's really interesting, isn't it? Because all of those things, including sugar, are taken to remove yourself from your real life and your responsibilities. And that's what it does. It stops you. It puts you in illusion. And we know that some people who are on alcohol live in a total illusion. And also drugs, even more so. Incredible illusions as to what's really going on. And they actually go into craziness. So you get a good understanding by looking at the extremes, and that's what we've done with the yin. So let's go down to the yang. Okay, and the yang is red meat is the extreme with salt, and then the other meats. Okay, and the only meats that are not red meat, because people get this very wrong, is the poultry, like chicken, and the birds, pheasants and things like that are more white meat. Although I think some birds are also pretty red meat. I think pheasants may be one of them. You may have to check that. But anyway, you don't really want to be getting into these tiny little details. Know that meat and salt are yang. And if you eat, I mean, I've known people in my family who just salt their food before they even taste it. I mean, it's just crazy. I hate it. If somebody was about to eat a meal that I'd made and put a lot of time and energy into, and they threw salt over it before they even tasted it. I mean, I have never salted a meal while I've cooked it for decades, and I have never been low in salt, because everything that you're eating naturally contains a certain amount of salt in the right form. And I'm still never, do you know, I think there might have been an occasional time, maybe a half a dozen times in the last 3 decades, that I've even salted when I've cooked something like fried potatoes, and I've put a tiny grind of sea salt on them. But this is not natural for other people, is it? They think that you need that salt. Well, I like to stay in that middle balance, and I don't miss it, because my taste buds have altered completely from when I was a child, when everything was salted for me that my mother cooked. And so I taste amazing flavour. I mean, that's a luxury in my life, is all the flavour of all these things that I cook. Like even eating this celery leaf is incredible if you just eat it. And my taste buds are ready for that, because I don't have that salt addiction. I don't have any of those addictions for all the extremes, like meat, that flavour of meat, umami, they call it. But if you use miso, and some of the other beautiful Japanese things, also other flavorings like celery actually, and the herb lovage. Lovage is even more impactful than celery. Kind of similar, but it gives you that really umami flavor. So vegans have different ways of putting in that umami flavor, but I'm certainly not addicted to having meat in my mouth. In fact, it makes me feel sick to think about it. But the yin and the yang. Okay, so in the middle. So let me just tell you that coming up from the yang, total yang of meat and the red meat, you've got the white meat of chicken, and then you've got fish. Okay, so fish is better. And if anybody's really struggling with giving up eating flesh of any kind, because that's what it is, then I would always say to them, go on to fish, and they love it. And a lot of people stick with fish and chicken, which means that if you've already started drawing your graph, you know that they are now coming up more to the balance if they put those in, okay? And as long as they're not going really extreme with the sugar and the alcohol up here, then they're, just taking out the red meat has brought them up and out of the extremes, which means, because think about it, if you go into the extremes, this is like the Sunday dinner syndrome in England, where you eat all your meat. This is normal. You eat your roast meat, slathered in your beef gravy or whatever. And then you feel full, but you feel out of balance. So you eat a big bowl of ice cream or steamed pudding with a lot of sugar. Because what you're trying to do is bring it into the balance in the middle, okay? But you can't do it properly. You do it by chung, like bringing yourself up with the sugar. That is not your body being in gentle, normal, healthy balance. That up and down, which people do, especially with an English diet, I think also with an American diet, if I think about it, Japanese and Mediterranean is much more in the middle naturally. They do eat the meat, but they don't go to the extremes of lots of meat, like the Japanese eat tiny pieces of meat and lots of vegetables. So that balance is going to be up here. It's going to be like on that line, isn't it? But more naturally. But if you eat that big roast dinner and then you've got to eat that sugar to bring it in, you're bringing in lots of yang and then lots of yin and hoping that you happen in the middle. And this is what leads to all the illnesses that are about and that we have in England. People think it's normal to have arthritis, which I could tell you incredible healing stories by dropping red meat, but I won't do that now either. We'll do that on another video. But you're getting the picture. So in the middle here, let's talk about that real balance, and that's grains. Okay, so if people are eating lots of rice, okay, or lots of bread, actually, it can be bread. You can keep a balance there, although wheat is not one of the best because a lot of people now, and it's not because it's the normal Saxon times wheat, is it? It's not spelt that people are eating. That was the normal wheat. What's happened is it's been bred to have high levels of gluten, so it's now much more yin. Bread has become yin, whereas it was a good balance to eat wheat or soaked wheat grains for breakfast with a little bit of water and fruit and sometimes a little bit of milk. So your grains are here, okay? And then I'm going to go roughly over the others. But the root vegetables, actually dairy comes in next, right? So we got the dairy coming in above that line. And if people eat a lot of sugar and dairy, because if you think about a lot of desserts, there's sugar and dairy, they're really bringing their yin up, because they've not only got the sugar, they're putting the dairy in it as well, which is above the line. And just below, I'm thinking about this, just below here, you've got the start of your vegetables. So you've got your leafy vegetables, the things that grow above ground, like these two, okay? They're more yin vegetables, but they're above the line. They're healthy. They're where you want to be, because if you eat the grains and you even eat a little bit of fish, you're going to be bringing yourself back to that equilibrium, that balance, that line of happiness, let's call it that, where your nervous system's happy, so your mental state's happy, your physical's happy because you're not overloading it. So you can exist in that line. Then underneath the, so lettuce and all things like that, tomatoes, they're quite yin because they grow above ground. They're very red as well. I think that's part of it. And they've got quite a lot of acid in. And then you go to the root vegetables. So the root vegetables come somewhere here. If we call this the line, then we've got root vegetables because they grow underground. And you tend to eat those in winter when you need warming foods and more solid foods like carrots and potatoes. So here we've got more yang, but we're closer to the line. So we're still close enough to the line to not take us into that Western out of balance swing, which goes yang, yin. And then some people are like, eat all the meat down here, get into the yang angry state. And then they take drugs, they take dope. That's a common thing, isn't it? You take the dope, chill out, but you've eaten the yang. Your body is going like chung, 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 up and down, no balance, no equilibrium, no natural health. So look into it more for yourselves, because I've put all the basics in here, I think. All the berries and the fruit are slightly more yang, but you're not going right up to that sugar. If you put artificial sugar in, and if you put sugar beet and sugar cane in, that's a huge hit of sugar. It was never meant to be eaten like that. It was probably just meant to be fermented, actually, into some sort of medicinal brew, if you think about it. So your apples are brilliant. They're just up here. You can balance yourself here. You could have grains and fruit and have a vegetarian diet that's beautiful, because you're going to stay here and happy and fluid in your body, in your nervous system. You're not eating any of the aggressive stuff down here. Okay, so why do people go vegan? This is an interesting one, because do you know something? Goodness, for 30 years, I'm pretty sure it was at least 30 years, I was vegetarian, and I thought veganism was really extreme, but in a lot of ways, I was nearly vegan anyway, because I had allergies that came from eating dairy. When I say allergies, I could really experience the mucus in my body if, like I would get up and have to clear my throat of a morning. I didn't have coughs or things like that, but I could never understand why I had to clear my throat. What was going on in my throat? And that was because I maybe ate a cheesecake the night before or something, or I ate something with dairy in, like I ate some brie cheese. And so I was very limited on the amount. And I got it down so low that if I went out, it was only when I was having a treat. I'd go out for lunch with my daughter or something. Then I'd choose a dessert thinking, oh, I'll just do it. I'll eat a bit of New York cheesecake, And as it was brought to the table, I would start sneezing. This was crazy. I used to sit there and laugh and think, oh my God, why am I doing this? So it took me a while to take out the dairy. And when I did, I couldn't believe it. It was about 6 months in to doing no dairy at all. And I suddenly started to relate and know, and yet I wasn't eating it and I wasn't around it. And this just whole truth came over me that meat was flesh. Now that really profound thing, which is still with me. When I see meat, I see it as flesh. I don't see it as a food. I see it as flesh of an animal. So I shifted. I mean, I always knew it was flesh of an animal, but there was a huge energetic change in me that knowing could never be unknown. And it happened 6 months after I cleared I would say, I was clearing out every cell. This is deep, but I think it's true. Every cell in my body that was grown through, maybe every cell in my body that was grown through the help of dairy and animals was now gone or was going. Because maybe it didn't go until they say your whole body's new in 7 years. And it's been 7 years since I've been vegan pretty well now. And that I could never change my point of view on knowing that meat is flesh. You are eating flesh of an animal. And that's how I see it. And that's the word that comes to mind every time I see somebody eating it, is they're eating flesh. That's okay. They haven't got to this point yet. But that was an amazing thing. That was like a subtle shift that was huge for me. In my understanding, my knowing, I would say in my knowing, went deeper as I cleared the cells in my body built by the small amount of dairy. Because remember, I wasn't eating very much of it because it didn't agree with me anyway. So veganism is a whole new thing that there is. When you become vegan, it changes you whether you like it or not. But also think about how that has occurred, because Going back to my own experiences, I had a client for many years who was a lot older than me, and she was brought up in her childhood a lot of the time vegetarian, and that was because her mother had a spiritual links to the spiritual world. She was connected. My client was brought up with a knowledge of people like I'm trying to think what his name was. Krishnamurti, people who walked around and did lectures on inner truths and truths of the world. So she was already connected. That was why this client called Pam, she was initiated into a different life, although she didn't keep to being a vegetarian, but her mother was there. And whenever they got ill, so that was already going, and that was in the early 20s, 30s, because Pam was active in the war. So, well, she drove, so she was, she could, not that they needed licenses or anything at that time, but she was telling me about her adventures with driving cars around and things. The whole difference there was that her mother used to fast them. If they were ill, they just were taken off food, because her mother already knew these truths, which didn't come even forward on the outskirts until many years later for the normal person in the street. And her mother came from the rich side of society, but the bohemian side. There was always a bohemian side. I think it was the 30s. This is probably, I'm trying to think now. Yeah, probably the 30s. So it was already there, wasn't it? The whole thing about not eating meat, because there were people in the bohemian areas and quarters of living in the 30s and 40s who were already doing this. Some people think it's really new and came in the 80s and 90s. It didn't. There were, her mother was also into, and so was Pam, Blavatsky, who was a really deep spiritual thinker of our time. And she donated, well, she didn't donate, she gave me, because she was getting very elderly, she gave me all her books on Blavatsky. I ended up, because of how different stages of my life started and ended, I ended up selling my whole library of books at one point to go bankrupt. Because, and I'm trying to think, this may have been when they doubled the rent on my whole food business and my healing centre. And I don't know who was behind that, but it makes me think these days, because I've realised that there has been somebody who's been, and different groups who've been trying to sabotage. But I didn't think about that at the time. I just sold my library of books in order to go on, because I knew that if I ever needed any of those books, I was already into the synchronicities big time. If I ever needed Blavatsky again to read, which I never did, but I knew it would come. It popped into my field somehow in a charity shop or whatever. It would come. So I had no qualms about selling it, even though I loved my books, because I needed to move on to the next stage of my life and I didn't have the money to do it. So looking at that now, vegans, we've got loads of vegans now and they're so healthy. Look at the bodybuilders. I love this part of it. Athletes, bodybuilders, and we have whole football teams. I remember reading this whole article on this whole football team that I think they went vegetarian maybe, but there are amazing bodybuilders out there. And so this whole myth that there was, through the mechanistic view that we started with, that protein, animal protein, was a total necessity, is gone, hasn't it? Because if you look at those bodybuilders, they don't eat the vegan bodybuilders do not eat any animal protein. They look amazing and their energy is incredible and they're very balanced within as well. Get to know a few of them, check them out on the internet. So that was a myth. And I remember listening to a doctor who was talking about his evolution of understanding food for himself and how healthy he was now that he understood all the different sides of food, the energy, the not eating flesh and all of that. And he said even in his early career, he and other doctors used to talk about the fact that they had never, ever in their whole careers, and these were long-standing doctors, seen a person who had a health condition because of lack of protein. So there you go. And that came out of the mouths of doctors who've now evolved even further and are now out there talking about the importance of eating live food. If we go back to the basics of the mechanistic side that people start with, like, am I eating enough vitamins? That minerals is one of the real missing things because people eat too strict a diet of several foods that they eat every day and don't change. So what a good idea is there, I've just remembered this looking at these beautiful rosy apples here, is that you should eat the rainbow on your plate. Because if you do, this red is coming from, and I think it's probably beta carotene, isn't it? So that is a particular, the colouring is a particular vitamin, right? And the green is the same. So all the different colours are giving you different minerals and vitamins. So that's the easiest way for you to start not eating crap food made up in packages and all dried food and all stuff like this. If you want to get in the vitamins and minerals which keep you alive, keep your energy clear and beautiful and vibrant, right, then you need to start eating the rainbow on your plate. That's a really simple way. So, okay, we've done the kind of evolution of the mechanistic, of the vitamins, minerals, and the myth of protein and everything else. And then we've gone on to the Chinese yin and yang, where they understood the energy of food. And I've given you a basic there, which you can really get involved with, because it's simple to understand what you're doing to yourself. If you feel really lightheaded and can't concentrate, then go and eat something more yang and come down into like the root vegetables, or even go into the fish if you still eat the flesh. And you could put just a little bit, if you had a real case of feeling ungrounded, you could use a little bit of salt. But what I would say to you is, keep miso in the cupboard. Miso is a paste made which has a beautiful flavor. The umami flavor for vegetarians and vegans is a lot of miso. And the miso is fermented soybeans, right? So that's the basic of it. And when it's fermented and it has this salt flavor. So if you made yourself a cup of miso soup, just using a teaspoon of miso out of your tub and poured hot water onto it, not boiling, because boiling kills the probiotic in it. But if you pour hot water onto that and drink it, it will bring you up to balance without putting just a bit of sea salt in, which is too extreme. There is salt in the miso, but it's in a much more balanced form. So if you want to come out of the airy-fairy state, then do that. I'm just thinking here, I have incredible pieces here to go on to, which is where can we go from there? And I've had amazing experiences on taking this whole what is food thing to its extreme. And I've done that by going breatharian for a period of time. So I think what I'm going to do, because that's another whole story, and I think I'm going to end this here so it's not too long to listen to and get the information from. And you can actually go back over this as well if you need to. And what I'll do is do a part 2. So I'm going to say namaste. I'm going to say please subscribe if you like the information I'm giving out here. I'm trying to give, all the information that I've learned from in my life, excuse me, onto this channel over this period of time. That's why I've been quick in bringing out all these videos. And this is a real large part of it, is the food side of it. And as we go on to the next one, you'll see how important it is. And then I can tell some more stories of my actual experiences of food and health. And when you don't have a good understanding of what food really is, how you can live a very average life that you kind of look at and think, oh, I'm going to get old, I'm going to get old and ill. And that is definitely not in my vocabulary. In fact, I'm going to wipe that away from me now, because I don't say things like that. But I know it's the norm for people. And I want you to be extraordinary with your thinking. So I hope you enjoy this level of talking about food and get a better understanding of your own food going into your body. But also, please give us a thumbs up. I'm trying to get so that the algorithm is with me. And it would be great if we can get more people being able to see these videos, because they don't actually go up and are being seen with a lot of impressions of this video unless people have liked it, subscribed. Comment if you want. If you have a real life lesson that you got through food and changing your food, then please comment, because then we can get a conversation going about it. Thank you for allowing me to be in your space for this time today, and have a great day. And just think really carefully about what you're putting in your mouth every time.